So as a leader, if you have the opportunity, and you should look for talent, people who have an insatiable appetite for learning, who have communication skills and want to put in the work and are humble, set clear goals and standards, give them an opportunity to make mistakes, coach them through that, and delegate and go from there.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Gallagher. So I know you've heard the question or questions often asked, are leaders made or are they born? Well, my guest today, Damon Lembi, is going to finally answer that question for us. So you just have to wait a little while longer, but he's going to make sure you know before we go. And I think he's going to have a great answer to that question. Damon is a two-time best-selling author. He's the CEO of Learn It, which is a software platform that teaches ultimately has uplifted 2 million people in their leadership development since he brought the company out. And I'm excited to talk to him about that a little bit more. He also hosts the Learn It podcast, and you'll get to hear a little bit about this because I'll just probe it anyway. But he was a high school and college All-American baseball player and was drafted by the Atlanta Braves. Then I just learned, he was actually close with one of my favorite players growing up, and that's Joe Montana, when he was with Notre Dame and the San Francisco 49ers. So this should be a great conversation today. Damon, welcome to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great, John, and it's an honor to be here. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we jump into those stories and answer those questions, I'm going to give you the same first question I always give my first-time guests, and that's to tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
So the story that comes to mind, it was around 1982, so I was 10, and my father was the CEO of Savings and Loan, and called Continental Savings of America, and we did, and we're big sports fans, as you kind of mentioned, and he had what was called Kids Opening Day at Candlestick Park, and what he did was it was the first Saturday after opening day, and he bought 25,000 tickets for the game. And he bussed in all of as many kids as possible from inner cities and low-income neighborhoods. And we rented out half of the parking lot at Candlestick Park. I was able to be the ball boy that day, the bat boy. And it was a tremendous experience because my dad, and this is part of what I'll always remember, was he was a big fan, for the underdog. And he always wanted to give people an opportunity and a chance who maybe wouldn't have gotten that chance. And so if we fast forward 30 years later, unfortunately, my dad was passing away from cancer. And I was there with him and his college roommate, this great guy, black guy named Bert Strain. And we said, Bert worked with my dad. And he said, we're going to bring this back, Walt. You're going to get out of this hospital and we're going to have baseball for the stars. And, we knew he wasn't going to get out of the hospital. But what we did, John, for 7 years straight was, in my dad's honor, is we got 300 to 400 kids from Oakland, California, San Leandro, all these areas, and their parents. And we brought them out there. And I brought all my ex-baseball buddies. And we have speakers like Ricky Henderson, Coco Crisp, John Sally, even Joe Morgan. And we just talked a lot about how, through sports and other avenues, you can get out of the situation you're in. And there is more to life than drugs and crime. And it's just something, when I heard this question and prepared for it, it's something that I always believed in, is giving underdogs the opportunity and finding other channels to find your way in life. And I think sports has been a huge one for me. And it's really helped me model my perspective and approach to leadership.
Love that. And I use sports analogies all the time in terms of leadership development. You see, while it's blurred out a little bit, the Uncommon book by Tony Dungy and the daily devotional that I use from Tony Dungy, I could go through the list. You Play to Win the Game with Herm Edwards, and certainly Lou Holt's books that are sitting up there, Winning Every Day. I mean, the different versions, the Notre Dame version and the South Carolina version, whatever that is, but the Notre Dame version has to be a better version. But then there's this book as well that I just finished up, The Learn It All Leader. That's a story about sports and how it impacts leadership, and ultimately how it's led you to build your company, Learn It. So Tell me a little bit about this book first. Again, two-time best-selling author, and Damon, I've made my way through it. Who did you write this book for, and why did you write it now?
So I originally set out to write a book. I was thinking about writing a book about my family and my experience in San Francisco. But as I got thinking about it, I wanted to. I had a unique opportunity. I played sports. I played baseball for three Hall of Fame baseball coaches. So I wrote this book for other individuals who, let's say, they didn't go to, nothing wrong with Harvard and all these, MBA schools, but individuals like me who either went to a regular college or maybe didn't even go to college, to show them that through hard work and continuous learning that you can become a great leader, and thrive. Number two, I feel like I've had this unique opportunity to see behind the curtains of all these great organizations over the years, great leaders and poor leaders, John, and how they go about their business. So that's number two. And number three, of course, as I mentioned to you, I've got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I wanted to be able to share my legacy, but also my mom's still alive, but my dad's gone, and I wanted them to be able to learn about the upbringing I had, and the learnings from them as well as my grandfather. So those are really the three reasons that I wrote the book.
Oh, love that, and I've appreciated the stories that you have all through the book. Look, let's just jump right into it in terms of what you have there. You broke the book really out into two sections. You mentioned that, for leaders are beers and they are doers. So tell me a little bit about that and kind of how you came to that framework as you're going through the book and in your own leadership development.
Yeah, so I broke it down into being and doing, and being is really about the mindset. And so I refer to it as a learn it all mindset, similar, obviously like a growth mindset. And that is always that great, like you mentioned, I believe great leaders understand that they don't have all the answers and that you have to be continuously growing. The opposite of a learn it all is a know it all. Somebody who comes to the game, they have it all figured out, their eyes glaze over when somebody asks them a question because it's my way or the highway. And I have found that some of the best leaders I've come across are ones who are always open, and they're humble, and they're looking for ways to always adapt and grow. So that's like the first half of the book talks about that, and then the second half is that I heard this great quote from somebody that learning without doing is treason. And so the second half of the book are some practical insights and actionable takeaways that for actually applying what we talked about. Because I got a bunch of books behind me, you got a bunch of books behind you, but if all you do is read and you don't roll up your sleeves and actually apply any of the stuff that you learn, I think you're missing out on a great opportunity.
Amen, brother. And I think that, and I take it back to scripture as well in terms of, what we learn out of scripture and how we live our life, giving us the roadmap to live a great life as well. But many books, you're exactly right. And if we can be intentional at those books, look, I was in my own personal leadership development and still to this day, I have to fight it. But I get this sense of when I see the cover of a book and I'm like, that's the answer. And as soon as I read the book, I'm going to have it and I'm going to know it. And you can see by our bookshelves that it wasn't one book that impacts us and takes us all the way through that. But this is a book, no doubt, that's got a lot of those stories. Chapter one, right off the bat, in terms of being, you said go all in. One of the things you talk about in there is the imposter syndrome, something we hear about a lot lately. Tell me a little bit about that and how you have experienced that yourself and help others to overcome it.
So the imposter syndrome, whether you want to call it self-doubt, limiting beliefs, I think, John, that we all go through it. We all experience it. And what I've also found that is the higher you go up in the ladder at work and the more senior you get, it doesn't go away. It still hits you. And if somebody says that they haven't had the imposter syndrome, then they're either lying or they're sociopaths, And so what I wanted to do is share my experience, and my experience really with imposter syndrome, really for the first time, was when I finished high school. I was a high school American, drafted by the Atlanta Braves, as you mentioned, and I was always one of the best players around. And I played, across the country and even in Korea. But for the first time in my life, when I got to Pepperdine, I realized that everybody there was as good or better than me. And it was really for the first time in my life where I thought, do I even belong here? am I even good enough to be here? And I remember like it was yesterday, and I tell this story in the book. But I was walking into the office of my coach, Andy Lopez, and this was our first player coach sit down, kind of like a performance review in the fall practice. And I sat down, and Lopez, before I even had a chance to speak, he leaned forward and he said, Damon, when I recruited you to come to Pepperdine, it was because I believed that you would be a great third baseman and you could hit in the middle of our lineup. But he said, you know what, son? And he sat back, crossed his arms, and said, you just don't have what it takes to play Division I baseball.
Hmm.
And he was just quiet. And so you can imagine how I felt. I felt like, how do I get out of here? What's the quickest way to get home? I'm floored by this. I knew I wasn't doing well, but I didn't know that my coach thought I wasn't good enough to be there. And before I had an opportunity to answer, he sat forward again and he pointed at me and he said, that's not what I believe about you. That's not what our coaches see in you. Our coaches believe, and I believe, that you have what it takes to be a great Division I baseball player and probably play professionally. But the situation here is, Damon, it's not up to us. At some point, you need to get out of your own head and you need to compete. We brought you here to compete, and until you do so, you're gonna continue to struggle. And John, I'd like to say that I immediately left Coach Lopez's office and turned things around. Unfortunately, I didn't. I got hurt. My season came to an end. I bounced around a little bit, went to a junior college, and then I got an opportunity to go play. I got a full ride again to Arizona State. And at Arizona State, a lot of people, before I took the scholarship, they said, Damon, maybe you should just go to a small school. Maybe you can just go someplace where you can get your degree and you can move on with your life. But I said to myself, hey, this is my last shot with baseball. So I'm going to face these fears straight on. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what I did. And I came up with this three-step framework for overcoming imposter syndrome, which is really work hard, number one. I don't think that you can, there's no hacks to success. You have to work hard. Number two is deliberate practice, right? So let's say that you're struggling to get, you're going to give a keynote, or maybe you're managing for the first time, and you're kind of wondering, like, oh my, am I even good enough to be in here? Well, you find out the areas that you think you need the most work on and put in the deliberate practice. And then step three is when you step into the batter's box or you step up on stage, is learn and let go, right? You've worked hard, you put in the deliberate practice, and now just go out there, forget about techniques, and just give it your best shot. And really, John, what I found is that too often we're just so hard on ourselves, right? And we don't give ourselves enough credit for stepping out of our comfort zone and trying things that most people never even get to that point. So you should give yourself a pat on the back, whether or not, let's say you crush it or you fall flat on your face, or maybe you did somewhere in between. It's all learning opportunities. And so with that, I mean, that's my recommendation advice for everyone is for to how to overcome the imposter syndrome. And even a step before all of that is think about what you're so worried about. And at the end of the day, I was worried about, maybe not making the baseball team. Well, if that's something you could live with, then just go for it. So that's how I recommend, conquering a head on imposter syndrome.
I don't know why, but for some reason I used to be a horrendous golf game, which I don't play golf anymore, was a lot of like what you're talking about there. Work hard, deliberate practice. You can practice all you want, but if you step up in the box and you're trying to tell yourself all the steps that are going to practice, or step out onto the tee box and try to do that, you're guaranteed to do what you just said. You're gonna slice it. You're gonna miss, swing and a miss, whatever that is, because you're overthinking it. But developing that ability to let go once you get there and trust that all that hard work and that deliberate practice is going to work for you is very important as well. And this is a step that many don't overcome. And that's why they don't end up in the major leagues or on the professional golf links or whatever that is to go forward, is that they hold themselves back simply from a mindset standpoint. The other thing that came to mind was the Nick Saban quote that, you don't practice until you get it right. You practice until you can't get it wrong. That's that deliberate nature of just saying it's going to be fluid, it's going to be motion, and it's just going to happen. And I appreciate that, whether it's in the batter's box or it's on the stage where you're getting ready to do a presentation, or frankly, to your point about leadership, where you're getting ready to give feedback to somebody for the first time. It's very difficult to do, but if you practice at it, you model it, and then you let go, it's usually some of the best things can happen. I appreciate you sharing that as you go forward. Now, when you think about your personal development, in terms of both in your organization as well as your own personal growth, you mentioned that biographies are one of your favorite books to read. Do you have a favorite biography that you've been influenced by that has made a difference and you want to share with others?
I love the question. I think one of my favorite biographies of all time, I don't think I know, is Losing My Virginity by Richard Branson. And at the beginning of my career, around 97, 98 is when I first picked it up. And I loved all his stories. I'm also a big fan of music, but he shares a lot of his challenges going up against the big guys and some of the mistakes he made and the challenges and what's overcome. And so I love that. I love all his work. He's got some more recent versions of kind of like a biography or business book. So I love his work. And I'm also a big World War II buff. And I love a bunch of Winston Churchill biographies. So I can't think of a specific one, but I've read several of them.
Okay. No, I appreciate biographies as well. I usually listen to them versus reading them, but I do like, I tend to, this is again a mindset for me is I like a book that I'm underlining and taking key points from. But biographies is really staying focused on the way that leaders made decisions, the way that they overcame stress or tribulation, because they all faced it. And frankly, as you said, even the imposter syndrome, some of those great biographies detail what they had to overcome to get there too. And I think that can be a powerful story. Okay, we got to come back to the first question, and that was: Are leaders born or are leaders made? Answer that question for me, Damon.
Neither. That's my answer. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, so
tell me
they're
more.
they're always in the making. Okay, so sure, some people are born with the innate ability to have charisma or whatever, uh, but that's not going to carry you throughout your career. Especially in today's world, which is crazy how fast. I think human knowledge is doubling every 12 hours, right? And seven generations in the workforce, you can't less rest on your laurels. And as far as it comes to being made, there's just so many different things out there and so many different ways to do things that you have to be constantly learning and growing and adapting. So you're not born or made, you're constantly in the making.
All right, I'll take that as an answer. I appreciate that. Always in the making, and I think that goes along with your book, "Learn It All," leader. That we never really get there. That we always need to be on a learning path. Your company, Learn It, has trained, equipped, inspired more than 2 million people since its inception. Uh, Tell me how Learn It does that. How do you inspire and encourage others? What do folks need to know about Learn It?
So originally we started off as we're a live learning platform, but originally for the first 20 some odd years, we were mostly in person. Go on the client sites. We had locations in 10, 12 different areas across the country. And then with COVID, with everybody else, we pivoted. We went mostly virtual. And I'd say about 90% of our work is now virtual. We have some e-learning. And John, I'd say companies turn to us when they're looking to equip new managers with skills and resources, especially mid-level managers who need the most help. If there's an organization where maybe that they're struggling with communication and they want to build a better culture of communication, or even just want to have a thriving learning organization, so they turn to us and we look at building out training programs that help align with the skills gaps that they have, and we deliver it through either 2-hour virtual sessions, and we supplement it with other learning opportunities now, with whether it's AI tools that we have that we use, but that's typically what it is. We're mostly almost all B2B, and we work with organizations of all sizes, especially individual contributors through middle managers to help on key skills whether it be adaptability, innovation, leading teams, emotional intelligence. And on the flip side, we still do a lot of Microsoft Excel training.
Love that. And yeah, the simplicity and the need for Microsoft Excel training. You mentioned it, AI. Things continuously change in the world of technology, and you provide a platform that's mostly virtual and it has to be challenging from a business growth standpoint. How are you embracing, if you will, that AI technology and how it's impacting your business?
I would say for whether it's Learn It or any of your listeners out there, we have to embrace AI. And I like to say, I mean, you've probably heard it before, is AI going to take your job? No, somebody who's a power user in AI will. What I've done is, similar like you talked about in chapter 1 of my book, is I've just kind of gone all in. I rolled up my sleeves. I think, especially if you're a leader out there, if you want your team to embrace AI, which I hope you do, you got to model that behavior. And so even if it's just starting off and just using ChatGPT or Perplexity or some of these tools, get yourself familiar with it and then invest in, getting tools for other people in your organization, because if you don't adapt and grow with the technology, you're going to be left behind. And I look at it, for the learning industry, I don't believe that AI is going to take over coaching or live learning. I think it's going to be a great supplement because, John, whether you're coaching clients or we're delivering workshops, a 2 hour session, one and done isn't gonna create that stickiness and retention. You're going to need additional tools, whether it's an AI habit coach or follow up information that pings you on different behaviors you're trying to change. So I think you have to go all in, can't hide your head in the sand. AI is here to stay, and obviously there's going to be some social and ethical things you need to take into consideration. But I think it's absolutely critical from this day moving forward.
I love that. And again, embracing it. It doesn't have to be the AI of artificial intelligence. It's augmented intelligence is there to help make it easier or make it better for you in terms of that training. You mentioned the people side of it in your organization. Again, are your jobs going to be taken, whatever that means? But that also means that you're always on the look as you grow your organization for people to bring onto your team. You mentioned that you advocate when hiring potential over experience. Tell me a little bit more about that and how that's benefited you and your organization.
Yeah, now obviously you can't do it for all positions. So if you're a $50 million company and you need a COO, I probably wouldn't recommend, hiring somebody right out of grad school with no experience. But in most positions, you know, in the San Francisco Bay Area where we're located, it's tough for a small bootstrap company like Learn It to compete for talent. And our secret sauce over the years is we find people with aptitude and attitude, and we bring them in, that align with our core values that we have at Learn It around continuous growth, teamwork, accountability. And if they have those values, then we bring them in and we give them the opportunity to learn, make mistakes, and grow, which I think is incredibly important. And in doing so over these years, I look at it like sometimes we're like a minor league team where the talent comes and they stay with us for 4 or 5 years till they get brought up to the big leagues. Maybe they go. We've had so many employees leave Learn It after 4 or 5 years and go to like a Google or something. But the great thing about that is they just always keep referring people back to Learn It. So I think as a leader, if you have the opportunity, and you should look for talent, people who have an insatiable appetite for learning, who have communication skills and want to put in the work and are humble. Give them an opportunity, set clear goals and standards, give them an opportunity to make mistakes, coach them through that, and delegate and go from there.
You're talking about that the culture that's created. I still love the sports analogy of a minor league team up into the big leagues. Again, Damon, so you've always got to be looking for new employees, and you mentioned the core values of your organization, how important those are. How do you maintain that culture in your organization? And frankly, what tips would you have for other leaders who are trying to maintain a high performing culture on their teams?
Similar to what I said about AI, John, I believe it always starts at the top. If you have your core values and it's some acronym and you throw it on the wall or you throw it in your signature because you're a remote first company, and that's it, then forget it. I feel like as a leader of your organization and your senior team, they have to be living those values all the time. Because as a leader, you know this, you're always on stage. You're always on. And your team's always looking to you for how to behave and how to react and how to make decisions. And so I think modeling that behavior first and foremost is most important. And number two is you can't allow for toxic behavior. I've worked with so many customers, I'm sure you have too, where you have these top performers who are just terrible for your environment. And I believe that if you allow that to go on, the short term win doesn't make up for the long term impact it's going to have in your organization. So if your values are teamwork and honesty and integrity, whatever, then you need to lead by that. And if people aren't following that, then maybe first hire a coach like John and try to coach him out of that and see, if it can be changed. But if not, then you got to make those bold decisions as a leader and get rid of those people to continue to grow your company culture. Because if you don't live by the words that you say that you want your culture to be and model it from the top, then you can't expect everybody else throughout your organization to do so either.
Damon, I appreciate that call out. And I know I have clients and I know people that are listening have team members that are dealing with that all the time with regards to someone who may be a top performer, but they're not exhibiting the values that the organization states. And they can ultimately end up leaving an organization as a result of that. You have to be very well aware. And then again, those of you listening as well, as you look at that growth journey, make sure you're not one of those ones who's creating something inside of the culture, even though you're performing. Don't let your ego get in the way of your behavior because you are always seen. Integrity is something in character in terms of what's happening. It's so important to the organization. But I can't agree with you enough that the longer you let someone like that stay in the organization, the more damage that can be done long term.
I
Damon,
made
this has
them.
been a
I
great.
made
Go
those.
ahead.
I made those mistakes over the years. I'm sure we
Haven't we
all
all?
have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All and at the time you think you're doing the right thing, but the second you cut bait, it's like 1,000 pounds off everybody's shoulders, and your team sees that. So I just can't highlight it enough how important it is.
So important. Damon, two-time best-selling author, the Learn It All leader, mindset, traits, and tools. What do you got coming up in the future? What's next?
What's next is continue down the path of what we're going. Especially, we just built out some of our own technology for the first time, which is exciting. It's a learner portal which will add to the user experience and extra resources. Investing heavily in AI, like I mentioned, around both customer experience and also customer learning experience, and just continue to grow and evolve. I think one of the exciting things about Learn It is that we focus a lot on soft skills, which, John, I hate that term. Um, but those are the skills. If you look at the skills that are most needed 2025 and beyond, it is adaptability, it is communication, it is creativity. And those are like our sweet spot of what we're doing. So we're excited to help, future leaders thrive.
Damon, I appreciate that. And I smile. Yes, that is so true. When I think about the future of leadership development, I mean, the time when we're recording this, we're right coming up on an election and what we've been through as communities, in our homes, in our states, and in our country, frankly, that it's something that those soft skills, when we don't have them, become very apparent, and they result in relationships that are damaged. Hopefully, not for the long term, but certainly can be damaged in that time. Damon, I've appreciated our chat today. How do folks stay in touch with you and learn more about your organization? Learn It, over 25 years old. You should be very proud of that accomplishment to have an organization that's grown and sustained over that period of time? How do folks get in touch with you and learn more?
Well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so find me on LinkedIn at Damon Lemby. Uh, I've got a podcast, the Learn It All podcast, which I'm super excited about, bringing on great guests. So check it out there, and of course, learnit.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll put links to all those things in the show notes that we have. Damon, again, I appreciate our conversation. I'm going to give you the last word, and it's the question that I ask all of my guests as well. I'm going to give you a billboard, put it up there in San Francisco somewhere in terms of where folks want to see it or in your area. And you can put any message that you want to on that billboard. What's the message that you put on there and why?
Well, it was going to be great leaders aren't born or made, they're in the making. But since we've talked about it so much, John, I'm going to pivot to saying building future great leaders.
We need great leaders. We have such a void that's going on right now. So the work that you're doing is so important. Damon Lemby, again, thank you for being a guest on the Uncommon Leader podcast. I know our listeners are going to find value. I wish you the best going forward.
Thanks, John. I appreciate being here.